everybody. Joe Moore here. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. Today on the show, we have Peter Sjöstedt-Hughes, who is a professor of philosophy at the University of Exeter inside the psychology department, helping inform all the interesting stuff they're doing around psychedelics. And we've known each other for a while. I really appreciate Peter's work and love what he's up to over there in Exeter. And everybody should check out Peter's work for sure. And at the very least, follow him all across socials. There's all sorts of great stuff, always great art, and lovely quotes that are very helpful. So I think we are not asking enough philosophical questions. And I think Peter's doing a really good job helping future psychedelic researchers ask some important and perhaps well-structured philosophical questions. So we recorded this at Philadelic in the basement of the conference facility, wherever the building was. Sorry, I can't remember everybody, but the Penn Psychedelic Collaborative gave me a really nice room to record in, and I appreciate that. So thank you, Peter, for joining us on this one, and thank you to the Philadelic team for having me, and hope to do more. All right, enjoy this episode. We'll see you on the other side. All right, here we are, University of Pennsylvania. Some like to call it Penn. Philadelic. Peter Sjöstedt-Hughes, how you doing?
I'm doing well.
Did I say it right?
You did, yeah. First person ever. Well done.
You taught me a couple of years ago. So I actually teach people how to say it often.
Thanks.
Two people yesterday, like, Peter, sorry, hold on. Yeah, so we're here at this conference. You're here to give two talks on philosophy. I think you're doing metaphysics, and are you doing ethics too?
I'm doing one talk on... So the panel is ontology and metaphysics. I'm doing a talk on pantheism and psychedelic experience. That's with Christoph Koch and Valeria McCarroll. And then another panel tomorrow on, actually quite a personal one, being a philosopher and psychedelic research.
Yeah. I like that. That's fun. So you're not giving a talk on ethics, but we were just both in a talk where this physician was talking about ethics, and I popped over and said, I get a little confused when they say ethics. Like, I'm not really sure what they're meaning. Like, and Lenny Gibson and I have this conversation often. It's like they're talking about guild rules as ethics, as opposed to like a morality or like a Aristotle sense ethics.
Right, virtue ethics, yeah.
Right, virtue ethics versus like what should you and should you not do in your profession.
Mm-hmm. Normative ethics, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no, well, it's a complex discipline, ethics, really. We're teaching it on our PG Cert in psychedelics now. There's one sort of introductory lesson to the general philosophic theory of ethics, just so people can begin to get a sort of sense and a map, a structure of how to think about these things, because it's really not black and white.
Absolutely not. It's like that kind of classic puzzle. Your kid is at home starving and or needs specific medicine. Will you steal that to save your kid? You know, these like basic philosophical like problems you'd pose to like say, how do you dissect that? Yeah, well, I mean, these still apply, don't they? The issue of consent, appropriation. I mean, there's so many ethical dilemmas that emerge from the psychedelic field now. That I think, grounding, a sort of reintroduction of ethical theory is useful for practitioners, probably. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just sat there saying, okay, so you really want the drug war to get accelerated? Like, this is all I could hear from her. Anyway, let's talk about you. So you're a PhD philosopher. You've written some nice works, edited some works, and you're at Exeter now?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a philosopher of mind and metaphysics, I say, and I'm at the University of Exeter in England, in Devon. I'm actually in the psychology department now, strangely. Cool. So from the philosophy department to that, because I think mostly because of the psychedelic research we're doing there as a team. It's mostly based in psychology. So I work with Celia Morgan, Leo Roseman's moved over now from Imperial College. Oh, cool. We share an office, yeah. Andy Letcher's in that same office, So he wrote, Cultural History of the Magic Mushroom, yeah.
He's funny.
And things are expanding. We've got PG certs in psychedelics. The master's has just been approved, and we're looking at a psychedelic center. So a lot of exciting things happening there. Plus, of course, Breaking Convention. I'm co-director of that now. That's happening in Exeter in April 2025. So sort of trying to make Exeter the kind of hub of psychedelic research in Britain.
I love that. And I'm trying to make it this year to Breaking Convention.
Okay.
We'll see. It was a tough decision because I had so much fun in the San Francisco area for Bicycle Day last year. But Johanna on our team was like, really come. It's going to be the best. I was like,
Yeah.
fine.
No, you must. Yeah, we're going to have a few more people this time. Some more ticket availabilities. So we're looking at about 1,800 people. So yeah, it should be good.
And it'll be on the Exeter campus?
Yep, on the main
Cool.
Streatham campus. So it's going to be pretty epic. I can't actually disclose too much about that now. It's kind of, but we've got some interesting guests and lined up already. And yeah, a lot of installations, cinema, outstallations, activities. Hoping to get breathwork down there as well. So
I haven't finished my training, apparently.
No.
For breathwork, even though I've facilitated a shit ton of workshops, but that'd be fun to do that out there.
Yeah.
So the one point I'll ask you to disclose, do you know when tickets might go on sale for it?
yeah, they should. So it's early October now. Was it 5th of October today as we
Something like
speak?
that, yeah.
So it should actually, the tickets should come out within 2 weeks, and also submissions, call for papers should come out at the same time.
Great.
And also, I'm the lead editor on the book. The Breaking Convention always has a book, from the previous session speakers. So there's already a call for papers or chapters for that. So it's all, beginning to happen now, really.
Love that. So let's rewind the tape. So when did you become interested in psychedelics in a serious intellectual capacity, and also maybe how philosophy played into that? Like, what came first, Descartes or acid?
Descartes, really. I must admit, what happened? Well, I was teaching at this college in London, philosophy, and then the college wrote me into teaching philosophy of religion when I was like hardcore atheist, physicalist, and I was like, really? Okay, if I must. And I did, and I really got into it, and especially William James's work, The Varieties of Religious Experience from 1902 was one of the core texts, and he spoke about this drug-induced mystical experience, which I had never had. And so that was my first kind of, I suppose, real encounter with academic psychedelia.
He goes on and on about nitrous oxide.
Yeah, nitrous oxide is the only way to understand Hegel, he said, That was actually in an earlier paper than The Varieties, 1882, I think, on some Hegelisms, a giant footnote. It was like a stop press. Wait a minute, I've just written all this stuff about Hegel, but I've just taken nitrous oxide and now I understand it in a far better way. Anyway, so that made me interested in it. And then my brother is an amateur mycologist, and he said, in Cornwall, where I live, he said, Peter, these are magic mushrooms here, I think. And so I tried that. My mind was blown. And then I tried to look at the philosophic literature, not much of which existed, really, relatively speaking. And then so I started writing about it myself. And but I wanted to do a PhD in it. And it wasn't possible because there's no specialists, right? There's no supervisors that could do it. Now they can, right, Exeter. But so I did it in panpsychism, which is kind of related in a sort of way. Instead, I did that, but parallel to that, I was still doing a lot of public work on psychedelics and philosophy, like the TED Talk I did. That led to what happened then. I went to California and met some people there who were interested in pushing it forward, and then we had the Philosophy and Psychedelics conference.
Was that with Morg?
I met Morg there in California, in Claremont, right? And went with Johanna, actually. Me and her went to, her and I should say, went to one of his events in Hollywood, which coming from a little village in Cornwall was something very special. I really appreciated that, but that was a kind of like bonus to my trip there. It was really the Whiteheadian process philosophers that were key to pushing actually my career in philosophy and psychedelics. So the postdoc emerged from that in a way, from which our book with Bloomsbury, Philosophy and Psychedelics, co-edited with Christine Housekeller, came out, and that led to my lectureship, my permanent job in Exeter. but I moved to the psychology department because we started working with Celia Morgan there and others. And they asked me to teach philosophy of mind and psychology, which I do now. I'm currently teaching. Because, actually, there's a William James connection there as well. Because if you look at the origins of psychology in Wundt and James, like in James's Principles of Psychology, half of those 2 volumes are what we would classify as philosophy of mind today. So theoretical issues, right? Psychology, they moved away from that, became very psychoanalytic and so on, then very therapeutic, and then, focused on therapy, and then very quantitative, and it sort of lost its theoretical origins. Like basic questions like, what is psyche in psychology, and then the classic, philosophy of mind question, how does mind relate to matter? So I'm reintroducing that original psychology. You can call it like theoretical psychology or philosophical psychology. I mean, it essentially is theory, philosophy of mind. So, and the students kind of love it. They get really worried for the first few weeks and they don't understand what's going on. Like way too many isms to start with. But eventually they get head around it, and I think they come out and they get good grades and stuff. So I think I was just thinking actually the other day when I started teaching again for the 3rd time now, how important it is for psychology students who just kind of get their heads bogged down in details of, statistical inferences and so on and so forth. They don't think about the broader questions,
It's a big deal because you can get just caught in these measures as almost traps.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think that was one of the benefits of philosophy generally. It's like an overview and it connects different disciplines together. That's one of its kind of duties, you could say. So and I really love teaching that, really. It's quite fascinating. Interesting thing, though, in psychology, about 95% of students are female, as opposed to philosophy, it's 50%. And it's quite a different dynamic. And then they haven't got the philosophical background. I remember one student asking me a year ago, she said, we've been told, is it okay to cite texts written more than 10 years ago? Because, we've been told not to, like in psychology. And I think, well, listen, you can go back 2,500 years if you want. That's fine.
That's amazing. And I love that because I find it endlessly important that people who are doing really important work can think more broadly. If you're just so niched out that you've never even thought, like, what is mind?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, especially that question. I mean, it's like no one can agree on that. I was just speaking to Christoph Koch over breakfast today, actually, talking about that very thing. And it's like, it's just still an incredible mystery as to what mind really means and how it operates, whether there's a mental causation, or whether it can be reduced to substratum and so on. Still a completely open question, even with the greatest neuroscientists out there and philosophers out there and psychologists out there and so on, It's just maybe someone has got the right answer, but no one agrees on it. So we don't know.
So there's a term that the audience probably, most of them is not familiar with, panpsychism. Can you talk about what is panpsychism?
Yeah. So pan means all, everything, and psychism means, the psyche, the soul, the mind. The mind, really, it means these days. I mean, Psyche was, of course, a goddess and did relate to actually a butterfly and breath. But today it means mind. So panpsychism is all. Well, here's you have to be careful, right? So it means minds with an S. Minds are ubiquitous throughout nature, so they exist in all things like plants and fungi, molecules, atoms. Everything has, just as matter is more or less complex. So from a human organism to an amoeba, say, so is mind. So you get complex mind associated with the human and a simple mind associated with the amoeba. So yeah, panpsychism, everything has minds. There's an important distinction between like monads and aggregates and panpsychism. So panpsychism doesn't say like a piece of clothing, like my shirt, has a mind, a one solitary mind, because an aggregate, it's not a sort of it's not a partly self-sufficient system, whereas an organism is. So a lot of people sort of derive, just say, well, panpsy, how can you believe chairs and tables are conscious? Well, it's not saying that, right? Mm-hmm. Bruno even made that distinction between units and aggregates in the in the 16th century. So yeah, minds exist throughout nature. It's sometimes confused with pantheism, which is that mind is nature. That's Spinoza's view, God or nature. but they are interrelated. So Spinozism is both pantheistic and panpsychological, panpsychistic. And panpsychism, I think, is secular. It's an atheistic, well, not atheist, it's a secular point of view. It's not religious at all, right? You can be an atheist and a panpsychist, no problem at all. And integrated information theory that Christoph is known for with Tononi. I mean, that he's a panpsychist along those lines, you know. So it's kind of, I think, becoming, again, more respectable theory. It's got ancient origins. It was coined by Patrizzi, a Renaissance thinker. But the interesting thing is, his definition of panpsychism is what we'd really define more as pantheism today. So the meaning has changed over the years. But anyway, and you get it in great thinkers. I mentioned Spinoza. You get it in Leibniz. You get it in Bertrand Russell to a certain extent. Certainly in Whitehead, pan-experientialism, a variety of it. Whitehead's probably the greatest, most detailed version of it. Whitehead, Alfred North Whitehead's philosophy. Whitehead's a British philosopher who died in 1947. But, you know, interestingly, the main brand of panpsychism of the 21st century now is known as Russellian monism. So that's from Whitehead's student Bertrand Russell. But it's not the best, you know. I find it a pity because it's kind of Russell never formulated panpsychism properly. He just sort of, you know, alluded to it now and again, and people use his thought about structure and content. But you know, Whitehead did develop this great system of it, and it's not really used. So for example, there's this new book. Have you read it? The Blind Spot by Evan Thompson, two other authors.
No, it's on my list. Kyle read it and he loved it.
Yeah. Chris Timmerman actually suggested I read it, strangely. And it was very good. And it's using Whitehead and Bergson to critique modern science. The blind spot is that we don't take experience into account, essentially, in our hypotheses. And they use like Whitehead's fallacy of misplaced concreteness and Bergson's theory, and do a great job. They don't go positively into Whitehead and Bergson. They use them They use their sort of critique. But anyway, in that book, actually, he says, you know, bizarrely, they criticize panpsychism. And I think, how can you use Whitehead and then criticize panpsychism when he was the greatest panpsychist of the 20th century? And, you know, like corresponding with him, it seems that by panpsychism, they mean like Russellian monism only, which is really narrowing the definition. So when I say I'm interested in panpsychism, I mean a broader Whiteheadian process philosophy variety of it, which I think is a superior form. Mm-hmm. It's more parsimonious, just more logical, just makes more sense. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's panpsychism in a nutshell. I'm big on that.
I love it. And you brought up Whitehead, which is, I was hoping in part we would get there. And what was the term? Pan-experiential?
That was a term coined by David Ray Griffin to refer to Whitehead's version of panpsychism. The reason being that sometimes panpsychism is believed to mean that everything is like fully conscious, like a human can be when awake and aware. But in Whitehead's philosophy, that everything is not conscious in that sense, but everything is experiential. Now that includes the subconscious, of course. So the ubiquity for Whitehead is feeling rather than consciousness. Some people equate them, but some people don't. So you can have feelings without being aware of them consciously. You can become aware of them. Like, yes, I'm not feeling that great, am I? Or whatever. And therapy, of course, brings out certain suppressed feelings. That's the purpose of it. But that's the main difference, that there's an underlying kind of, that what's ubiquitous is feeling, not necessarily conscious awareness. But some people use consciousness broadly to mean feeling anyway. So it's just, another matter of definition, as often is the case in philosophy.
So it feels like there's some inkling of meaning here, but before we get to meaning, let's talk about a book you wrote called Neonihilism, which kind of like shattered my world for a little bit.
Sorry.
And it was a good one. It's like you eat the edible, it's a little too strong, and you're like, okay, I guess that was worth it, but good Lord. So yeah, what brought you into that whole kind of frame, and what was one of the more popular results of that book? It wasn't a book really. It was a chapter in a book, Numismatics.
But actually, no, I did sell it as an independent book as well. You're right. Yeah, I forgot about that. So Neonihilism, it's essentially mixing the thought of Hume, Schopenhauer, and Nietzsche. So I'm not claiming it's that original in a way. I suppose it's original in the way I presented it, and I was experimenting with a style, a kind of aggressive style of writing, kind of like as an artistic enterprise in many ways. And I suppose the ultimate claim of that text is that there are no objective morals. There's no, which is, I mean, in itself, not particularly radical thing. Instead, it argues that all morals are subjective, based on your individuality, but also your culture, your language, your history, the history of your culture, and so on. It's not really cultural relativism, though, because cultural relativism is moral from this point of view, because it's saying, listen, all cultures are equally valid, so you can't judge any. But that itself is a moral proposition, right? So something more radical than that. And the reason for writing it is, number one, experimenting with a writing style, a new writing style, which I've never actually used again. And secondly, I just wanted to clarify the arguments for this kind of this neo-nihilism, by which I meant, no objective morality. You can, nowadays, I call it ethical pluralism, which sounds much nicer and friendlier, doesn't it? But essentially, So, I just made as clearly as I could to people not without a background in ethical theory, which is like most people, obviously, just arguments saying, talking about if clauses and stuff like that. It was a long time ago now that I read it. But I still kind of maintain that to a certain extent. I suppose it is quite radical, but if you don't accept it, then you're into this, you're sort of almost moral realist, which is like quite a radical metaphysical position itself, which is hard to maintain. Anyway, so I wrote this just to get it off my chest, really, and as an artistic endeavor in many ways. And then, so the result of the artistic element of it was to influence this comic book writer, Warren Ellis, he was tasked by Marvel to recreate this superhero called Karnak, as part of the Inhumans family. And he said that he based that recreation partly on neo-nihilism, yeah. So I've milked that ever since. I think that was about almost 10 years ago now. But so it did, bear fruit. And I still I'm in that camp. I'm not a moral realist. I still, the funny thing with panpsychism is in relation to this, and I did my thesis on panpsychism after I wrote that, is that, in panpsychism, everything has intrinsic value. Like values are, flood reality. So in that, it's not a nihilism like doubting value at all in the universe. So there's, as a panpsychist, actually, I believe in more value throughout the universe than most people. But with Spinoza, I think that there's no absolute value. There are competing values, and sometimes if you want to achieve a goal, it's a good idea to share the same values, the same goals, and you work in harmony, and that's how civilization works, That's for the benefit of most, of course, but it's not absolute. Another civilization might have other goals, and thus you get conflict. Same applies to individuals and within individuals. So I don't regret writing it. I know it's quite radical, but I think it's true.
I suggest some people read that one and dig in. I, for whatever reason, I have mnemonics. I haven't engaged in it directly yet, but after that one, I was like, I need to give Peter a little break, and then I can jump in again. But it's important in the way you just kind of phrased that. So I was just at this kind of process philosophy conference. There's a lot of delegates from China there, and they kept presenting this value of harmony, harmonization a little bit. And that was like obviously the West and China have some, difficulty right now. And that seemed like the bridge. It's like, how do we harmonize with, because they realize that they're not going to have the whole world. Like it's how they were presenting it at this philosophy conference. Right. And it's like, how do we actually have harmony between conflicting values, structures, and like keep the tension, but like understand we need a certain level of that. It was interesting from a philosophical frame to see it in the abstract a little bit more.
I remember Whitehead saying that evil really is a kind of conflict of a harmony in a certain spatio-temporal location. So something that goes against that harmony is considered evil because it breaks down that sort of shared goal. But in itself, it can lead to something, another harmony outside of it, So like, for example, I don't know, like the Reformation, for example, that was discord in the harmony of the Roman Catholic Empire. But out of it came the Anglican Church, which then became kind of the basis of British civilization. And then you get discord within that, which was considered evil, heresy, But that created, a more secular world. Well, a seemingly secular world. If you're Nietzschean, you still think it's got a lot of Christian background. But yeah, no, so it's an interesting thing. It's kind of, evil is relative to harmonies. Could there be a global, a cosmic harmony, ultimately? Maybe. I mean, I should say another interesting aspect, which maybe changed my thinking a bit on this neonihilism, is pantheism. So I'm looking into that now. I moved from panpsychism going upwards now instead of downwards into pantheism. Basically means that God is nature. The way I look at it, there are different varieties of it, but my preferred one, Spinoza's and processual one, combination of that.
Literally God is nature, or nature is the mind of God, or is it like a kind of weird kind of juxtapiposition of all these things?
There's different varieties, but the monist pantheism that I think is the sort of main one derived from Spinoza really is that the universe as a whole, one way of looking at it is spatially or physically. So that's the nature as we understand it, the cosmos, the universe. But just as human has spatial aspects that are apparent, your body, so you also have mental aspects which are not apparent, if you believe in the privacy of the mental. And so the same applies to the universe as a whole. It seems like spatial, but it's got an internal aspect, as it were, which is the cosmic mind, cosmic consciousness, whatever you want to call it, the infinite intellect of God. But it's immanent, so it's not outside. So God is the universe itself, or there's this giant mind which is the universe, and our minds are partaking of that, like just as our bodies are partaking of infinite space, so our minds are partaking of infinite mind. It's quite parsimonious in many ways, and it's a top-down approach to consciousness. So it's not like it means that the brain and body are not sufficient for consciousness. They might be necessary for human consciousness, but we also sort of receive from the outside. So that relates also to Huxley's, Doors Perception, when he talks about mind at large, bringing in Bergson. Anyway, yeah, so with pantheism, which I'm exploring, I never really believe in anything. I'm sort of just entertaining ideas, but I like the idea. And if you say that minds have teleology, right? Tell me if I'm losing your audience.
Let's give
now,
teleology
right?
like some sort of directionality.
Yeah, that's right. So if like we have aims, like survival, for example, and all the manifestations of that, eating and so on, then you would expect, by analogy, if a mind has to have some kind of aim, then you'd think there's some cosmic aim. Bergson believes in this, the Chardin, Whitehead, actually, to a certain extent, says there's this kind of, what do you call it now, like upward urge or something, to greater forms of complexity and knowledge. Mm-hmm. If there is that telos, then that you can derive a normative morality from that. So if you want to allow for that cosmic telos, aim, goal, purpose to happen, then you should fulfill certain conditions for that. So when I wrote Neonihilism, I didn't believe in this cosmic telos, and I still wouldn't say I believe it, but there's a possibility that exists, in which case maybe there is some objective morality after all. Open-minded to it, but I'm not, it's very speculative.
So many people that are they're bringing so much like Christianity to it. Whitehead, for instance, and it's how do you kind of detangle the Christianity from something like a Whitehead and, perhaps make it a little more, I don't know, based on Plato or something, as opposed to bringing so much Old and New Testament baggage in.
Yeah, well, what happened in America with the Center for Process Studies, which I love. I love people there, the Andrews and all that, Cobb. And they've done a great job keeping Whitehead alive. But of course, Cobb and Griffin and that lot, Hartshorne, come from Methodist Christian background. So process
Griffin was.
Well, maybe not Griffin actually, but certainly Cobb, right? And Hartshorne, I think they were Methodists when their background was Methodism. Mm-hmm. Griffin was, I don't know, he was a bit on the outsider perhaps. But generally, I think there was this Methodist background to what became process theology. So it was kind of like mixing Whitehead with that Christian view. But I think you can do that. I mean, that was successful in its way. But you can also There are also Whiteheadians more in Europe, maybe, who are just secularists, and they don't actually like the divine aspects, theistic aspects of Whitehead. They say it's not necessary, which is general pan-experientialism and process philosophy. There are some process philosophers like John Dupre at Exeter who kind of take Whitehead, but they don't accept its panpsychism even, but take the processual view alone. They abstract from it. You can even paganize Whitehead, something I've been, I
met a few people in California or at Matt's conference with Ian McGilchrist. There's definitely some like 3 or 4 pagan process people there.
No, right.
Who've been working on it for a while. It was interesting.
Yeah. So, yeah, you can do that. I mean, the obvious relation with paganism is nature worship. So, if the whole of nature is alive in Whitehead's philosophy, the philosophy of organism, he himself calls it, then, of course, that dovetails nicely with a kind of nature worshipping revived paganism. When I say paganism today, it's kind of, revived form from the Victorian age generally, but why not?
Right. And there's obviously a lot of variation in there. Some it's just like far more metaphysically inclined than perhaps even around nature. But yeah, it's nature as whatever exists, I suppose.
Yeah.
So how do we bridge all this into psychedelics? Psychedelics obviously can help us really have challenging experiences and help us kind of challenge our belief systems. Some lines, one of my favorites is Timothy Leary, think for yourself, question authority. And it's like, okay, you're just, in Terence McKenna, culture is not your friend. And we're just like transmitted these like kind of memes that aren't necessarily helpful for us or interesting. And how do we start to begin to like think critically? And I think philosophy is a helpful tool for it, but it's such a big topic that, how do you like to think about this intersection for, I don't know, for yourself and then maybe for like an undergraduate?
Well, I wrote this paper like in 2023 on the need for metaphysics and psychedelic research and therapy. And the whole point of that paper is that, a lot of the psychedelic research at the moment is going on by scientists, neuroscientists, psychologists, clinicians, therapists who don't have a background in philosophy, which is not surprising, of course. It's not their remit, is it? It's not their ambit. But when they speak about mysticism, so you've got the MEQ mysticism scale, hood scale and all that, right? Don't really, what does it mean? So there's a whole kind of theological background to it, but there's a lot of psychedelic experiences which are classified as mystical are actually better classified as metaphysical. Like, for example, Humphrey Davy or William James's idealist experiences. That's not part of the MEQ even, idealism, right? But it's part of metaphysics. So I think that an understanding of, metaphysics is seen as one of the 3 core pillars of philosophy, along with axiology, ethics, aesthetics, and secondly, epistemology, theory of knowledge. But metaphysics, I think it can really inform our understanding of some of the experiences. So today, for example, my talk in a few hours is about pantheism and psychedelics. And so I'm going to go through a number of, key mystical experiences, so-called mystical experiences, and show that they're very much pantheistic. So the unitive experience, when people talk about boundlessness, the oceanic feeling. Oceanic feeling comes from Roland in his discussions with Freud, but Roland was referring to Spinoza in that, for example. Cosmic consciousness, it's almost a trope, isn't it? Well, it is certainly a cliche, and people think it comes from Alan Watts or R.M. Buck, who wrote the book in 1901, but you see it actually was coined by von Hartmann, who was a Hegelian Schopenhauerian philosopher. It's very much based on Hegel's universal consciousness, cosmic consciousness. So you can trace a number of these, even these so-called mystical phenomena to actual philosophical accounts, which then seek to ground it. So I think, philosophy's got a lot to offer, even therapy, like integrating those experiences. If you understand what they mean more, then I think it's easier to integrate them. If you're having a metaphysical experience, why not have recourse to metaphysics? It seems obvious, right? So that's the case I'm making. And this is one way in which philosophy, I think, can help, have practical applications. People always complain that philosophers are like in their ivory towers, doing, nothing useful. But here's an example where I think philosophy can be useful. Mm-hmm. Not to mention all the ethical dilemmas that, are hard to frame in psychedelia regarding, as we were saying at the beginning, consent and appropriation and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, to your point about philosophy being useful in therapy, I have this sort of nostalgia for that Esalen era where people seem to be relatively up to speed on not only philosophy, but things like comparative religion. So you could actually say, oh, look, here's some really interesting touch points that might be helpful for you.
Yeah. I mean, look at Alan Watts or, Huxley, the classics, they knew their stuff to a certain extent. Yeah, no, it's kind of pity that. Well, I think it's just part of, the so-called psychedelic renaissance is going through a clinical stage, which it sort of has to do to get mainstream acceptance. But of course, going through that means, it's very scientific, quantitative rather than philosophic, qualitative, which means it's not as enriching as it can be. And this could have, we might be missing out on potentiality there. Not just with therapy, by the way, but also with creativity, psychedelics for people who are not ill, right? Which I think is just as valid as for the ill. So it can enhance life. I think a philosophical understanding of certain phenomena, experiences, and so this is what I'm pushing generally, like a basic, let's input more philosophy into psychedelic research and therapy and creativity and just help everyone.
I love the idea of, 10, 20% of very active psychedelic scientists getting some sort of general primer on philosophy of psychedelics. So let's try to make that happen.
Well, as I mentioned to you before we started recording, I just got a contract at Bloomsbury for a psychedelic metaphysics manual, which will come out next year in 2025, hopefully. That's actually will be written for a general audience, so for practitioners and stuff, not a philosophical textbook. So it'll be hopefully relatively easy to understand with pictures and everything. So
I need pictures.
Yeah,
that's good.
We all need pictures.
That's fun. And have you seen an acceleration in interest around psychedelics and philosophy? I think I have, but I'm not 100%.
I suppose, I don't know. I mean, it's hard for me to say because I'm always in it, and it's like hard to be objective about that. What can I say? I mean, well, Bloomsbury published the book, Philosophy and Psychedelics. We've had a number of conferences, and, you see it around the world. It's like, panels on ethics, of course. I include that as philosophy quite often. But metaphysics, not so much. And I think that's just generally because metaphysics as a whole became very unpopular during the 20th century. Philosophy became very reductive. There's no such thing as consciousness, or it's just behavior or whatever. And we went through this so-called metaphysical turn only about 2 decades ago, maybe 3. So as a result, people like William James, they were well-versed in metaphysics of the age, and Buck and contemporary so-called scientists, psychiatrists, but things became too specialized and metaphysics became very unpopular and fashionable, partly because of the reaction to the Germans, for the wars, So like we had the British Hegelians, early 20th century, people like T.H. Green, F.H. Bradley, very popular in Oxford, in Scotland as well, Oxbridge, I should say. And, there was this massive movement away from that idealism, that metaphysics, that hardcore metaphysics to kind of philosophy of language, then logical positivism, behaviorism, and so on. And then science lost touch with metaphysics. And that's where we find ourselves in now. So we're kind of having to re-inject metaphysics into the discourse. It's kind of fun, but it takes a while.
So let's important thing that I guess Terence McKenna, Rupert Sheldrake, and a number of others kind of wanted to challenge. And these are kind of like the legacy people that we're kind of inheriting now, right? And they would talk a lot about this concept of scientism, which I usually equate with things like positivism. And I think there's, this general concept of the only thing we can have meaningful discussions about are things that are published in scientific papers, for instance, and everything else is not really meaningful, which is, brings in nihilism a little bit here. Like, what are we actually doing? Whereas there's so much to human experience, the lived human experience, that we ostensibly has some sort of meaning to it. I don't. Well,
the way I look at it, we're living. You can't avoid ideology in any age. I think, like the victory of an ideology is always when people don't believe they're in it, right? So, like, if you don't realize, if you think Christianity is just generally the way the world is, you're part of that ideology. And the same with science to a certain extent. Since the 17th century with scientific revolution, you can trace the lineage, from Galileo, Descartes, and so on, to, physicalism, basically, which is the metaphysical basis of science. Now, it doesn't need to be, right? but it's taken as, that's the ideology, that's taken as granted physicalism, which in itself doesn't make much sense. I mean, Hempel, if you're interested, Hempel's dilemma and so on, you can look into it. But, we've inherited this ideology, and I think it has quite... And then that's, first of all, it's because of industrialization, just worked well for machines. I wouldn't say capitalism also applies to communism, so it's not that political, but you also get, you certainly get it with Marxism. He turns Hegel's idealism into, or Hegel's, dialectical idealism into a materialistic dialectical materialism. So you get that Marxist push that's been very effective, which is essentially a materialist, and everything can be explained through economics and so on. And, the fall of the church, I think, is also, part and parcel of all of this, but it's, and that's partly the fall of the church in England, at least, is due to industrialization to a certain extent, because workers were taken from the lands with the Enclosure Acts into the cities to work in factories, become wage slaves, as it were. So they lost their parish communities and stuff like that. Anyway, it's a multifaceted problem, but there's been a decline in beliefs which are not reducible to matter. I think this is pretty harmful. This is one of the reasons people do suffer anxiety and meaninglessness and nihilism in that sense and so on. And people are kind of, they value just pure physicality. It's almost like, I think you mentioned Rupert Sheldrake. I remember in a podcast with Mark Vernon a few months ago, he said it's like a mother cult. It's like the worship of matter, So, although I'm a very skeptical person, I generally don't believe anything. I think, I am skeptical of that as well. And scientism really means, materialism as the ideological basis for science. Now, science, science can be non-materialistic. It doesn't have to be. It's a method, right? As a method, you do experiments, whatever. It doesn't have to have this metaphysical baggage, but it does. And I think we're moving out of that slowly now, because it's just come to cul-de-sac with consciousness studies. It just cannot explain consciousness. Neuroscience, we can map the neural correlates of consciousness to a perfect degree, theoretically, but even that would just present the problem as to how it relates to consciousness, how it relates to mind. It's not sufficient in itself, and the reason is that it's unwittingly, subconsciously driven by this underlying ideology, which is materialism or physicalism. So, so there's a need to fight that, in my view.
And if we're to be intellectually honest, and we are these, thinking it's all matter, and we're rejecting data points that come in, like we're not necessarily being intellectually honest. So we have to be able to account for all the data we're seeing. And that's challenging to the paradigm and threatening.
Yeah, it is. And, just in practical terms, to get funding and stuff like that, you have to follow. You can't be too radical. You won't get the funding. And this is how these ideologies propagate, and continue. They're just sort of, it's to do with money, in many ways. And, but there are exceptions. So, for example, talking about Whitehead, epigenetics is a good example. So now respected science, departments, universities, but it was seen as heresy, scientific heresy, only 30 years ago, as a kind of neo-Lamarckism as whatever. But one of the creators of it, Charles Waddington, his hypotheses, which established it, were based on Whitehead's philosophy. So he went against the materialistic grain, went for more of this Whiteheadian monism, as it were. And this led to the results that then resulted in epigenetics. So it's kind of like, maybe that's just to say, just one example, but it's just to say that a lot of hypotheses which then go, are tested in experiments are based on metaphysical assumptions. If you question that, you might be fruitful in other areas. Epigenetics just being one example of how that might happen.
Yeah. Hearkening back to the McGilchrist conference at CIS, and it was the types of folks they brought in. It was absolutely top tier scientists and cultural critics, et cetera. And it was mind blowing. And they were not trapped inside the kind of exclusively materialist frame.
Many scientists I speak to are not materialists. They're like enactivists from, extended mind theorists, whatever. But nonetheless, there's a kind of line you have to toe, again, with regard to funding and respectability and so on, It's kind of, you see in psychedelia as well, slowly scientists are coming into it, but, people are very hesitant with their reputations and whatnot.
There was a YouTube interview with John Buchanan recently, and the interviewer is a pretty clever guy and said, we're always cautious around these process philosophy folks because they're really just, trying to bring in some sort of witchcraft but it's somewhat true because there's it's just a very different look at how things are proceeding.
Yeah. Well, process philosophy is, process thought is a competitor to physicalist thought. So no wonder people are skeptical. And but I think with the sort of revitalizing of psychedelics, I see psychedelics as a gateway drug to metaphysics. So people have these metaphysical experiences via psychedelics, and then they get into philosophy. I think that's there's a study on this. Even
spend far too much on books at a certain point. So I hope people are tracking how this is related to psychedelics. One, we can kind of close on this idea, if you're cool with that. I think one of the more helpful things Whitehead put out just for a general population is fallacy of misplaced concreteness. Can you kind of can you say anything about that as it might relate to a psychedelic experience, or what is it? And then is there some sort of example you have that might be helpful?
What is it? Well, it's also known as fallacy of reification, and it essentially means that an abstraction is confused for a concrete thing. So
you wouldn't send an imaginary terrier after a real rat, I think was a Whitehead line.
Right. So, and that was an abstraction, first of all. An abstraction is, Whitehead's quite specific about it. He says it's not an illusion, it's part of the truth, but it's not the whole truth. So a classic example would be to think that his main application of it is really to our concept of the physical. So we've got a certain concept of what matter is. So, extended solidity with a certain mass, charge, spin, and so on. Actually, the properties of matter do extend as we advance in science, But to think that matter as we know it today is concrete reality is to mistake a part of the truth, so there certainly does have, solidity and mass and whatever, for the whole truth. And that's the fallacy of misplaced concreteness. So I'm saying that this is a concrete thing, but it's not actually. It's still an abstraction because humans have evolved to perceive the world in a certain way, which misses out a lot. We don't see infrared, ultraviolet, and so on and so forth. A gravitational pull of the table is non-perceptual to us, but it's there, apparently. So with Whitehead, if we did know the concrete nature of matter, we would realize that it's also mental. That's the mental pole. And that then leads to the panpsychism. So the fallacy of misplaced concreteness is a kind of path to panpsychism.
One of the book that turned me on to Groff was this kind of funny book they assigned in my Philosophy 101 called Holographic Universe by Michael Talbot. And they were doing these kind of scientific edge cases, saying here's thing in physics that challenges what we, realize, is potentially not true. This table isn't exactly solid. It is, but it also isn't. And, things like that. And then he did some psychiatry and started reading about, oh, look, this person seemed to have some ESP stuff going and looked like a demon for a number of hours, but then her addiction was gone for the rest of her life. And it was good God. It was quite the story.
Right. Yeah, well, I know a lot of these Whiteheadian chaps are into Groff and Whitehead, aren't they? Try to combine them, like John Buchanan, who's got this great book, Processing Reality, which does that. Lenny Gibson and others. I just don't know enough about Groff, to comment on that really. But it seems like a fruitful area. He developed holotropic breathwork, of course. So, and my view of that is that will become hopefully something like mindfulness. At the moment it's quite niche, but I think over the next few decades it could become a big thing to help people. So it's kind of induces kind of psychedelic-like experiences without any substances. So Groff is, the cause of that. The main cause, but not the only cause. So, I'm hopeful for that. And I do like reading Groff, but some of his metaphysics is even for me is quite pushing. So,
but I don't know that he's really developed it philosophically. It's more, he's a scientist with some philosophical leaning, but not really super well developed there.
Yeah. But he does talk about psychedelics inducing metaphysical interest, actually. I remember in his, I forget which book now, the one from 1980. Anyway, I remember the year, but not the title, strangely.
I love that.
That's what happens
so
when
probably
you get...
Realms of the Human Unconscious or LSD Psychotherapy.
Yes.
Probably one of those two.
The latter, I think it was,
which is published under a new name now, but you guys can figure it out. So, all right, in summary, philosophy can be really important here for psychedelics.
Damn straight.
And then Breaking Convention, April 25.
Yep, mid-April 25. It actually falls on Easter, the Easter holiday this year. But it has to be, that's unfortunate.
Is it Bicycle Day aligned? Like April 19-ish?
Yeah, that's right. 17th, 19th, which happens to be Easter, But
I love that I'm so out of touch with the Easter concept that I didn't even know. It's, apparently one of the holiest days of the year. I don't understand it yet.
Apparently some religion has that. Yeah,
and then there's Neonihilism, people should scoop, as well as pneumatics. And then you have some post-grad certs going at Exeter.
Yep.
And then...
Masters in Exeter as well, online and on campus.
Great.
Starting in September 25 on campus.
And what's the focus of those? Is it philosophy? Is it kind of broad scope?
No, it's called Psychedelics, Mind, Medicine, and Culture. So you get the focus on the mind, so from neuroscience, but also philosophy of mind, metaphysics. Medicine is obviously all the therapy, the clinical trials, and so on and so forth. And then the culture, history, anthropology of and other humanities that come into it, ethics, and so on. So there's a multidisciplinary approach to psychedelics, and I think it's really, really great course that we're developing. Like I say, we've got a lot of specialists in the field, and we get guest lecturers on as well, where we're lacking in Exeter. So it's all mushrooming nicely.
And then Philosophy of Psychedelics, or Philosophy and Psychedelics, is the name of the book.
And from 2022, that one.
Yeah, so
you were in it, aren't you?
Yeah. Originally, it was supposed to be about ethics and the drug war, and then I read all sorts of Aristotle as a result of going, what the fuck is ethics? And people think I'm a lunatic when I say, what is ethics? I'm like,
oh, really?
Yeah.
God.
But I'm like, okay, I read Aristotle, did you? Like, I don't know. I don't know where else to read about ethics.
Yeah, and Aristotle's ethics is very fashionable again now, virtue ethics, Spinoza's ethics as well. I mean, his main book is called The Ethics, even though it's about metaphysics. But essentially it's because of how metaphysics can lead to a virtuous life.
I like that. And
in terms of tranquility, peace of mind,
Lenny made us read Aristotle because he could get away with it.
That surprised me,
And then we ended up just writing a history of the drug war in America. Johanna, I think, contributed a little bit.
On Jung.
Jung.
She had a chapter on Jung. Matthew Siegel.
That's Siegel too, cool.
John Buchanan. Yeah. Osiris Gonzalez Romero.
He's fun.
Yeah, he's great. Yeah, I've got a chapter in there on Spinozism of 5-MeO DMT, as well as the introduction. Yeah, and, some really interesting. Well, I think they're all really interesting.
We didn't even get to talk about 5-MeO yet. I had my first experience with it in the last year. It was interesting. Lower dose and kind of a more somatic protocol, but it was really, really pleasant and really not... I didn't have the large enough dose for it to be challenging, I guess.
Oh, really? Okay. Almost it was like an either or with that, like either on that threshold or not. Actually, that's not true. I did, when I tried it, I did have the full-blown GE, but I was, when I tried lower dose to start with, it just didn't work, except there was a kind of almost like a nitrous oxide kind of tranquil effect to it. And then the full-blown effect when I topped it up.
Mm. Yeah, this was interesting because it was a 2 kind of lower dose pulls off of a vape pen, and they had like different dosing on the pen. So it was like 2 different low dose pens, and then 5-minute intervals between 3 doses, and the third one was like kind of more medium-ish. I was like, whoa, this is excellent. But, I could see the right person having a really hard time with that kind of dosing.
It's not for everyone. It's extremely powerful. Christoph Koch is going to talk about it today, I believe.
Can't wait.
His experience, and his new book is, starts with his experience, 5MO experience, which you can immediately recognize as such, the white light and everything. But yeah, no, very powerful thing. It took months to recover from that, in terms of like just trying to get my head around what the hell happened. It was just this sense of extreme profundity without an object. It's very, very, and the loss of the sense of time. This is partly why I took it. All senses were lost, memories gone, thought processes, but still a huge consciousness there, which just seems paradoxical, but it was.
A friend of mine, he's running a whole organization doing this stuff. He identifies that state with Tibetan state, Niva Kulpa Samadhi, which is like not the supreme state in the hierarchy of experiences in the Tibetan world, but pretty up there, like third from the highest.
I couldn't possibly imagine anything higher than that. It just seems impossible. Like, how could you go one louder? It just seems impossible. But okay,
I think this is where studying the religious philosophy is interesting too. It's like, how do we bring kind of this call it the Eurocized Kabbalistic view, or like the Tibetan Buddhist view, or even the assorted views, right? Like what does the hierarchy look like in the Hindu traditions, and how do we do like some sort of Ken Wilber exercise on making a matrix out of it? So I don't know that we need to do that, but it's nice to have those kind of touch points here and there.
Yeah, at Exeter we're facilitating a phase 2 trial with 5-MeO for treatment-resistant depression by Beckley SciTech. So it'd be interesting.
With therapy.
Yeah, there's an integrated phase after. I'm not personally involved in it, but be interested to see the results. There's, I think, 2 other places in Britain that are also taking part in that. But it's just started. So
great.
Yeah. Ontological shock for therapy, it seems. Yeah.
I'm glad you said the word. I was going to bring it up. We did an episode with somebody, Erica Rex and maybe Elizabeth Anglin. Elizabeth Anglin was a serial UFO abductee who worked with John Mack in a psychotherapy. Do you know John Mack?
Rings a bell, I can't.
Harvard psychiatrist who is doing a lot of UFO work at Harvard with experiencers in the therapy capacity. So he's not necessarily saying like, well, in the clinical container, he's saying you had this experience, let's work on it. Let's treat it like an experience you had. A little Whiteheadian. He was influenced by Groff and others, but this woman and Erica Rex, we would talk about ontological shock as a big topic and important. Like once you don't know what's true anymore.
Yeah, no, it's quite fascinating, really. I was speaking to Christoph about this at breakfast as well. And it seems just one. I mean, the classic example for me as a philosopher is A.J. Ayer. He had this near-death experience, which, when you read about it, he wrote about it in 1988. Sounds like a psychedelic experience. These light beings in the cosmos and stuff like that, which made him that just one experience. It was not induced by psychedelics, but by salmon. He choked on a piece of salmon in hospital when he had pneumonia already.
Yikes.
But
real suffocation.
But as a result, he said, I still don't believe in God. He's a famous atheist like Richard Dawkins. I still don't believe in God. However, there might be something in the proposition that consciousness survives bodily death, but I'm not sure, but maybe something there, which for him,
God.
No, absolutely not. He died a year later, so he might have found out, or he might not have.
Right. Or somewhere in between, maybe.
Maybe, yeah. But is that logically maybe. I haven't really thought about that.
Well, Peter, thanks for this, and I hope we get to do it more, and I'm really going to try to be in Exeter for Brain Convention.
Yeah, make sure you make it there.
All right. Thanks, Philadelic, for making it happen. And till next time.
See you soon.
And there you have it, everybody. Peter Sjöstedt-Hughes. I hope you appreciated that and learned a bunch of stuff. I always love talking philosophy. I don't really know that I know how to discuss it skillfully, but Peter makes it accessible. And I think that's something that should be done more often. And we should understand, like, where are these kind of logical fallacies or just, logical inconsistencies in a lot of our arguments, and what are we really going for? And perhaps there's some metaphysical truths that are pretty self-evident that could help us ask better questions and do better research or spend in the right ways, because we all know there isn't really enough money to go around in psychedelic research, so we have to be really skillful. And yeah, we saw that recently with that really disappointing set of science funding that was effectively wasted. So I think that's it for now. I hope you all enjoyed this episode with Peter, and we will see you on the next episode. Bye-bye.